Hello folks, it's IBIS time. That's the Indus Basin Irrigation System to you and me. We're going to look at how Pakistan has increased its food supply by irrigating a large area around the Indus River and its tributaries. So, let's get to it. Once again, I'm going to draw a little sketch map and some little icons to talk about the advantages and disadvantages. And if you draw along and annotate fully, it will help you answer the questions at the end. Good luck, bon chance, and see you later. So, the Indus Basin Irrigation System, or IBIS for short. If you're going to write IBIS in an exam, you have to have written the Indus Basin Irrigation System out in full once, with IBIS in brackets afterwards. After that, you can use IBIS, but you can't just say IBIS from the very beginning because people won't know what you're talking about. So we're going to start with a sketch map of the region, and we're going to draw in the coastline of Pakistan. So this is the Arabian Sea, and I'm going to trace up the course of the Indus River, which generally heads kind of northeast and then takes a bit of a dogleg into China. I think the next important thing to do is to draw in a very rough outline of where Pakistan's border is, and it's kind of largely an oblong shape. So we can label the Indus River. We know that this is Pakistan. Up here we have China, and over here we have India. Now, the Indus River has several major tributaries, smaller rivers that flow into it, but these are really massive rivers in themselves. So we have the biggest is the Sutlej, which travels significantly into India and actually into the border of China over here. So this is the Sutlej River. We then have a tributary of the Sutlej itself, which is the Ravi. And we have two other rivers that we want to draw in here, the Chenab, and finally the Jhelum. You don't need to know all of these river names, but just having a couple will improve the quality of your answer. So, in terms of managing the irrigation system of the Indus Basin, which is the whole of this area here, 3 major dams have been built. The first one was higher up the course of the Indus River itself, and this is the Tabela Reservoir. And then just a bit further south, before you get to the confluence between the Sutlej and the Indus, we have another major dam, which is the Chasma Reservoir. And our third big dam and reservoir is found on the Jhelum River, further to the east of the Indus drainage basin. Now, let's start a little key and list of the works that have been done as part of this irrigation system. So we have 3 major dams and reservoirs. In the Indus Basin. But as well as those 3 major dams, we've also got 100 plus smaller dams and barrages. And I'm going to mark on some of those major barrages and their relative positions onto our sketch map. This is just a small proportion of them to give you a sense of how they fit with the wider irrigation system. Okay, so there's a few of those there. The other thing that we want to draw on are link canals, and they allow transfer of water between the rivers. So we can see that we have one transfer of water between the Chasma Reservoir and the Chenab River. We also have another one that is transferring between the Chenab River and the Ravi River, and another one between the Ravi and the Sutlej. Now, these are by no means the only transfers. There are lots of others, but basically it is taking water from areas of surplus to where it's needed in areas of deficit. And broadly speaking, we can say the north of Pakistan is in surplus and the south is in deficit. So we want to help transfer as much water across this southern region as possible. As well as these link canals, we also have 1.6 million kilometers of ditches and channels for irrigation. So a truly massive scheme that is all about moving water and irrigating land to increase food supply. Let us not forget, this is a food supply question, and this is a major scheme to increase food supply by distributing the waters of the Indus Basin across a wider area. And in a second, we're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that. But before we do, let's have a couple of questions. How many major dams are there located in the Indus Basin? Very good. 3. Now, name 2 of those dams. Good. You could have had the Tabela Reservoir or the Chasma Reservoir. And I didn't name that one for you, but just in case you'd like to know, it's called the Mangla. Give me an example of where a link canal has been used to transfer water within the Indus Basin Irrigation System. Lovely. You could have said water is transferred from the Chasma Reservoir to the Chenab River, or water is transferred from the Chenab River south to the Ravi River, or water is transferred from the Ravi to the Sutlej. Describe the water scarcity pattern of Pakistan. Good. In the north, it's broadly a water surplus, so more water than is needed. And in the south, we have a water deficit, so not as much water as would be needed. Very nice. Let's now have a look at our advantages. So, moving the page up, and we have advantages of IBIS. We're going to start with looking at the fact that this was the area that was under cultivation or growing crops beforehand. After IBIS, that area increased by 40%. So we can say that there was a 40% increase in area under cultivation. That means used to grow crops. Why was there this large increase in area under cultivation? It is because of irrigation. So all of those canals and dams that we just spoke about allow sprinklers, hose pipes, buckets to be used to irrigate the land. And with that irrigation, we can grow more crops and increase the yield, because more area is under cultivation. So we can talk about crop yield increases because of irrigation. And all of that irrigation leads to a greater diversity of produce and an increase in quantity of produce. So we can have a nice range of fruits and vegetables, like the tomato, my favourite one. We can still have the grains like corn, wheat and barley to produce breads, particularly breads as a carbohydrate. Maybe there are more aquaculture projects to produce fish in the various canals and lake systems. And all of this leads to increased nutrition. So decrease in malnutrition, decrease in diseases because people are healthier, increase in work productivity, because they have fewer sick days, and that improves quality of living and the GDP of the country. So many benefits coming from increasing the yield and improving nutrition. Another major benefit of the IBIS is that behind those dams and barrages we can store water which can be used for hydroelectric power. So hand in hand with food security goes energy security, which means we can have cheap and reliable power, which increases business profitability. It increases education opportunities. Children and students are able to study later in the evening by the power of electric lights. Schools and colleges have access to a range of equipment like computers that require power, and so the education of the area also improves, and both of these things together lead to an increase in gross domestic product because people are making more money and people have more skills. So once again, a happy side consequence of the IBIS project is increased power and all of the benefits that brings. Finally, behind our dams we are storing the water in reservoirs and regulating the river that flows out the base of the reservoir. This means that we can store water and manage floods downstream. So we regulate the flow. So many benefits. Let's number them. Increase in area under cultivation. Increase in crop yields. Improvement of nutrition. Hydroelectric power generated. And regulation of water flow, reducing flood risk. Let's have a couple of questions about the advantages of IBIS. What does cultivation mean? Good, it means the growing of crops. Why has cultivation, or the area under cultivation, increased 40% as a result of IBIS? Correct, because the irrigation allows more area to be farmed for crop growth. How does the increased food supply benefit the national economy, the gross domestic product? Okay, good, because there is less malnutrition, because people are getting a better diet, therefore less people have diseases and taking less time off work, work productivity increases, and the gross domestic product also goes up. Furthermore, one might add, what else is increasing the GDP that is associated with this IBIS system? That's right, the hydroelectric power generated behind those 3 dams and 100 smaller dams is providing cheap and reliable power. This benefits businesses, allowing them to be more profitable, and provides education opportunities to make a more skilled workforce, all of which helps the gross, or helps the economy to grow. Lovely jubbly. Okay, let's have a look at the disadvantages, because sadly it's not all positive news. So here we go. Disadvantages of IBIS. The first thing I'd like to talk about is I'm going to draw a large raindrop to represent the amount of water that's provided by the IBIS scheme, and then I'm going to divide that unequally, because some farmers are getting more of the water supply than others, which means that those farmers are going to be pretty cheery, putting on weight, and supporting their families well, with lots of money coming in. However, in other regions, their fellow farmers are remaining very thin, with a smaller amount of the total water available, and so experiencing less benefit. So we can talk about there being an uneven distribution of water across the basin, and this leads to economic and social inequality. The quality of life of this farmer and her family is going to be significantly lower than this farmer and her family who have money to buy medicines, extra foodstuffs, education, and all the benefits that might come with having a little bit more income. Another disadvantage of the scheme is that it is pretty expensive to maintain those dams. The original dams and systems and link canals were paid for largely by development aid, but maintaining the dams falls to Pakistan, and that is a difficult financial obligation. And so in the future, that whole irrigation system may become less effective. And the final disadvantage I'd like to talk about is if we have irrigation again. So here's our sprinkler spraying out the water. We can talk about inefficient water use. Water use. So there's water is lost from the system, but equally by spraying water in abundance, a lot of it, onto the soil, we encourage the build-up of a salty crust. This is known as salinization. The problem with the salty crust is that the crops cannot grow in these salty conditions and they will die. So the crops die and the land becomes infertile for decades to come. So you won't be able to grow crops in that area for a long time afterwards because the salty conditions have ruined it. So, some advantages and disadvantages to IBIS. Let's not forget the fact that the area under cultivation has increased dramatically, the amount of food, the yield has increased dramatically, people's nutrition has improved, the economy of the country has improved. There are problems, but on balance, without this IBIS scheme, the rapid population growth in Pakistan would have posed many problems for food supply. As of now, they have largely been avoided and the population has remained fed. So if you're going to write a 9-mark answer about this, you can talk about the disadvantages, but you'll probably want to say that overall those advantages are more significant. Okay, let's have a practice at some questions, which I'm going to put under the lens for you now. They're shorter questions, breaking down what might become a 9-mark question in your exam. So in your exam, a 9-mark question may well ask, for a major food supply project that you have studied, discuss how effective it has been, or evaluate how effective it has been. That will be the Indus Basin Irrigation system, and you might want to talk about these things here. So, describe how IBIS increases land area to be cultivated for food supply. 4 marks. What are the facts and figures? 3 major dams, 100 smaller dams, etc. Then, explain 2 advantages of IBIS. You might talk about the increased yield because of 40% increase in land for cultivation, better nutrition. You link all those 3 together, you've got yourself full marks. Explain 2 disadvantages of IBIS. You might talk about the uneven distribution between some farmers. You might talk about salinization and making land infertile. So, have fun, off you go, and use your notes to make sure you're writing, well, first of all, try and do it without your notes. Flick back to your notes if you need to check something, and then use your notes afterwards to green pen and add anything that you forgot. Good luck, bon chance, and signing out.